The FBI arrests of pro-life advocates that began last month with Mark Houck have only continued. Now, the accounts of heavily armed FBI agents dragging pro-life leaders from their homes are chilling.
And I go and I see our whole driveway and our whole lawn covered with, it had to have been at least 15 vehicles. In fact, once I had gone downstairs, I could see that they were around the side of my house and everything. Heavily armed, shields, helmets, vests, big, huge, long rifle type guns.
That was Ryan Marie Houck, the wife of Mark Houck, recalling last month's raid related to the events that happened more than a year and a half ago. The prosecutor looked at the facts and refused to press charges. Houck and other pro-lifers are accused of violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, also called the FACE Act, a conviction that could lead to more than 10 years in prison. In addition, as previously mentioned, 11 more pro-lifers have been arrested in response to protests that happened in March of 2021, more than a year and a half ago. How many cases have there been in the attacks against pro-life pregnancy centers? 0. Has the Biden administration weaponized the government against its political opponents while overlooking criminal offenses from the left? Joining me now to discuss this and more is U.S. Representative Jody Hice. He serves the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. He represents Georgia's 10th Congressional District. Congressman Hice, good to see you today.
Great to be with you, Joseph. Thanks.
Very quickly, what's your reaction to this, what is now a string of arrests, certainly a pattern of pro-life activists?
Well, it is a pattern, and it's exceedingly disturbing. There is no question that we are witnessing right now in the United States of America the weaponization of our federal government to go after political enemies, primarily conservatives, Christian conservatives, pro-life conservatives, Second Amendment conservatives, Trump conservatives. And our federal government is being weaponized, the Department of Justice, going after these individuals. And it is frightening. It's chilling. This is something that never, ever, under any circumstance, would be taking place in our country.
Now, Congressman Hice, you use the word chilling there, and the display of force being used in some of these raids can also be described as chilling. We played that comment from Mark Houck's wife. She estimates between 20 and 30 agents, 15 vehicles, all with weapons drawn, over what was by all accounts a minor physical altercation at best. Why do you think that kind of display of force is being used at a residential home, 7 kids in the house, never a record of any kind of violent offense? What's happening? What's the motivation behind that show of force?
Yeah, it's all intimidation. It's coming after the American people by use of force and intimidation to try to get people not to stand up for their constitutionally unalienable rights that we have to express our worldviews, our personal views in the public square, and to stand up for them. And this administration does not want that to happen to those who are on the other side of the aisle to their political agenda. And so this is all about an intimidation. And keep in mind here's an individual, Mark Houck, who just 3 months ago offered to voluntarily turn himself in. The cases have been dropped in Philadelphia. And my question is, the FACE Act, now that we have the reversal, if you will, of Roe v. Wade, does the federal government even have any jurisdiction on the FACE Act, seeing that there is no federal law on this issue? This has now been kicked back to the states, so I believe there's a legitimate question as to even the jurisdiction that the federal government has on this thing. But look, there's so many problems with this. And at the end of the day, though, I believe it's an act of force to bring about intimidation.
You've been tracking the story for a while. Last month, you and 22 members of Congress wrote a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland asking some questions, looking for some answers specifically related to the Mark Houck raid and subsequent arrest. Did you get any answers?
Not yet. That letter was led by my friend and colleague Chip Roy, and as you mentioned, there or many of us that signed on to this. But listen, we want to know, among other things, how many other investigations regarding the FACE Act is the FBI involved with? What is going on here? This is an abuse of force, abuse of power, abuse of rights on American citizens, and a weaponization of the federal government. And we want answers to these questions. And so far to this point, nothing but crickets.
In the quest for answers, what information would you need to get from the Department of Justice that would make the actions from the Department of Justice justifiable?
I don't believe there's anything that would make this justifiable, given the circumstances in this particular case. As I said, all the charges have been dropped by the state. They've been dropped in Philadelphia court. There is nothing here for the FBI to be involved with. And we were told on the House floor just a couple of weeks ago that by the Democrats that federal force would not be needed, that this would be, the FACE Act is going to be left up entirely to the states. And the only exception might be is if the states request help or need help, then perhaps there would be a reason for federal assistance. But in this case, the state has dropped all the charges. There's nothing there. I cannot imagine what type of additional information the FBI would have to justify this abuse of force, given the circumstances of the drop charges and given the nature of the fact that Mark Houck himself offered to turn himself in. Why this use of force with 20, 25, 30 FBI agents fully armed makes absolutely no sense.
It'll be curious to see as that case drags on whether Mark Houck doesn't have, in fact, a lawsuit himself against the Department of Justice, if it turns out to be just a purely spiteful, politically motivated case. But Congressman Hice, you are also a pastor. In that role, in that sense, what's your advice to pro-life activists, to just Christians who see a government that looks increasingly hostile to our beliefs and to those who might speak publicly about them? What's your advice?
Well, it's the same thing that we saw in the book of Acts. When Christians were being persecuted and chased from city to city, they stood up for their Christian beliefs. They stood up for their Christian values and in essence said, you do to us what seems right to you, but for us, we are going to continue standing for the gospel of Jesus Christ and for the things that we believe in. And sometimes, yes, there are consequences with that. Absolutely. At this point, this current administration is trying to intimidate Christians from standing on their constitutionally protected rights, and even beyond constitutionally protected, they're unalienable rights. These are rights that government did not grant. They are rights that government cannot take away. And yet we are watching the intimidation. Religious liberties are being tremendously threatened in the United States these days. And this is a time for all of us to stand up, stand firm, to pray like we've never prayed before, and to engage like we've never engaged before in terms of standing up for what we believe. And the truth is, most of the time when we take a stand, Joseph, we win. But to cower under the intimidation certainly is not the answer.
Fear is never the right response. Now, Congressman, I want to switch gears with you. Last night, Kamala Harris was on the Late Show with Seth Meyers talking about a range of issues, including what the upcoming election means. Let's play clip 3.
If we keep our numbers in the Senate and elect 2 more United States senators, then the president can sign into law the Women's Health Protection Act, which would put into law the protections of Roe v. Wade. So critically important. 29 days to go.
Congressman, it's clear that Kamala Harris and the Democrats really want to make this election about abortion. Do you think that's a winning strategy for them?
It's absolutely not a winning strategy. The vast majority of Americans want some sort of restrictions on abortions. And those restrictions vary from individual to individual, but the vast majority of Americans do not agree with the Democratic Party's push towards unlimited abortions right up to the point of birth. And this is, look, we've got to protect life. As we all know, without the right to life, none of the other rights that we have really mean anything whatsoever. And so this is certainly a biblical issue. It's a moral issue. Unfortunately, it's been pulled into the political arena. But this is what the Democratic Party is hanging on to, and I believe it will absolutely backfire on them.
But it is worth every voter worth noting that what she said there is true, that if the Democrats do pick up 2 more seats in the U.S. Senate, they would essentially codify abortion up to birth, perhaps after that, as a matter of federal law. And everyone should have that awareness when they vote in November next month, or in the coming weeks, in fact. One other clip, she was taking on the border as well, specifically addressed how Governor Abbott in Texas is responding. Let's play that.
I just think it's an absolute dereliction of duty. If you see a problem, and if we agree that we need to address it, then if you're a leader, participate in a solution, right?
Congressman Hice, Vice President Harris has been appointed as the border czar, but apparently taking shots at Governor Abbott for his dereliction of duty. What's your reaction to that?
The real dereliction of duty is here's the so-called czar of the border who has not even been to the border. She's not even gone to check it out. She absolutely is refusing to do her job as the so-called czar of the border. Look, fentanyl is now the #1 killer in the United States. It is because our borders are wide open and fentanyl is literally pouring across our borders, as are terrorists, criminals, human trafficking. I've been to all 9 sectors of our southern border. It is absolutely inexcusable what's happening at our southern border. And here, Vice President Harris has not even bothered to take a trip to look at it herself. And yet she prefers to sit in her elitist high chair, instructing the rest of us, lecturing the rest of us about morality of the border, when it is a disaster, a crisis on every level, and she and President Biden are responsible for it.
And Congressman Jody Hice, thank you so much for your time today. I know we will do it again soon.
Thanks, Joseph.